Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast. We are live following the Wolves bounce back win over the San Antonio Spurs on Wednesday night at Target Center. Marnie Gellner and I are going to break it all down and share our key takeaways from the game. The Locked On Wolves postcast starts right now.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beacon. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm joined, as always, on the live Locked On Wolves postcast by Marnie Gellner of Bally Sports North. And after a really, frankly, disheartening loss on Monday to the Spurs, this same Spurs team down 35 in the fourth quarter, pulled to within 9, but really it wasn't that close for most of the game on Monday. 48 hours later, the Timberwolves come out and play a lot harder, play a lot better in general, and come out with a 12-point win over the Spurs on Wednesday. Here right off the bat, Marnie, what's your biggest takeaway from this one?
Just the fact that this team looked completely different than it did on Monday, because it was a little shocking. You and I talked about that. Just the overall effort and execution was not there on Monday against a team that is not as good as the Timberwolves, but was better definitely on Monday night. This was a completely different story, and this is what needed to happen. If the Wolves didn't look completely different from Monday to Wednesday, then I think you have reason to be a little more concerned if you weren't already. But this was a great game. It was highly entertaining, a lot of different guys involved, a lot of ball movement, a lot of connectivity, a lot of positives. And that was a bottom line, like, needed to happen after the way things went on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Anthony Edwards, we can start with Ant. He was one, I mean, really nobody played all that well on Monday for the entire team, but one of the biggest culprits Monday in terms of energy, there was, of course, he talked about that post game, and then there was the whole, 2 days of dissecting his comments and Karl Anthony Towns' comments and the whole thing. But then Ant came out and started. I mean, he set the tone on Wednesday, and the first quarter, I mean, he made 5 3-pointers in the first quarter, had 15 points and 4 assists. And it wasn't just, I mean, they were good shots too. I think there was one heat check 3 in there, but they were good shots. Passing the ball well. He passed out of a couple, what looked like he was going to dribble into a tough, long range 2 and passed out of it. Just a really strong, bounce back for Ant himself after not playing very well Monday. And then he bookended it too at the end of the game, had a really strong fourth quarter when it was still kind of 8 to 10 points with 2-3 minutes left. And it wasn't over. And Ant stepped up and really shut the door almost all by himself in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, he was really good tonight, especially from 3. In the first quarter, he was 5. You mentioned the 5 3 on 7 attempts. He was 5 of 7 from 3 in the first quarter. And he drove the lane and had a layup at the cup, like a contested layup, as the buzzer went off in the first quarter. And he missed that one. But, oh, my goodness. Yeah, when he feels it early, too, there's just like a different bounce in his step throughout the game. We were doing the post-game show from Target Center, and about 5 minutes into our post-game show, we can hear shots going up, and you can hear rebounding and the squeaking of shoes. It was Anthony Edwards. He had come out of the locker room onto the court, and he shot for 20 minutes on a night when he had 34 points and had 5 threes in the first quarter. So there must be something stuck in his craw, or something that he's not satisfied with. And we've seen him do that before, but when he's come out after the games and shot before, it's been on a really poor shooting night. And like, he just has to get that taste out of his mouth. Mm-hmm. I can't remember seeing him do it after a good shooting night. I don't know if that's a sign of growth or a new routine he's trying out, but it was a really good night for Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, agreed. And also I thought with Karl Anthony Towns, I mean, the story is Ant, and I want to talk about Jaylen Nowell here in a minute, but I want to mention Towns here too, because his line wasn't, it wasn't the line we're going to be talking about from the box score. He did have 21 points. He had 7 assists, 4 rebounds, a couple of steals, but this was a really, I think the way I would describe it is an in-control game for Karl Anthony Towns. We've all seen those games where, the highs are really high, but then he gets a little excited and throws, a crazy behind the head pass, or he, gets a couple consecutive offensive foul calls, or there's too much complaining to the officials. And this, I think there was only one kind of bad pass he made the entire game. The rest of it, he was very in control on both ends of the floor. He didn't get into foul trouble. This was a really solid, this was Ant's night. Jaylen Nowell did a lot off the bench, but 21 and 7 assists for Cat, 21 on 14 shot attempts, and he didn't even get to the free throw line. This was just a really solid all-around game in my mind from Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yeah, I called it a calm game from him. And Monday night was not a calm game for Towns. And I feel like San Antonio irritated him deeply and started off from the first minute of the first quarter and were very physical with him, and almost like the game plan was to irritate Karl. And the Spurs did irritate Karl. Tonight, either they didn't do it the same way or Karl didn't react the same way. But yeah, it was a nice, calm game for him. And he was conscious of distributing the ball too and getting guys involved. And then he got his. And it like when it works out like that, it's so satisfying to watch a game where Edwards had his moments, like Karl had his moments, and Nowell had his moments. And it's like, if you give to other players, that does come back to you. You like Karl didn't have any, I don't even know if he took a shot in the first quarter. But he was giving, and he was letting Ant have his space in his room. And then it came back to Karl eventually somewhere else in the game. So when that happens, I feel like, okay, this was good. This was a team game. This is the way we were supposed to play.
Yeah, 100%. I want to talk about Jaylen Nowell and the Wolves bench as well. First of all, let's talk about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. All right. What are your thoughts on Jaylen Nowell's night? I mean, this was a really impressive performance from Nowell.
Yeah, I thought he was awesome. But he's done this before. He just is a spectacular scorer. Whenever we ask his teammates about him, the Wolves are always like, hey, he's a bucket. He's a bucket. He's a walking bucket. And it never fails. The dunk he had when he took on Jakob Poeltl at the rim and like clutched for a second and kind of shifted left in midair and dunked it on Poeltl. Oh, and Jaylen Nowell, I mean, there's almost a 6-inch height difference probably between those two. That to me was the exclamation point, the most spectacular point. But man, Jaylen is really consistent and he's efficient too offensively. And I'm never really surprised when he does that and has these kinds of performances, but it's like an easy guy to root for. And kind of a spectacular player to watch. And tonight was one of those nights for sure.
Jaylen Nowell was there in the third quarter to kind of, get the Wolves back in the swing of things. It was a really, really extremely rough, third quarter defensively, giving up 41 points to the Spurs. But Nowell, we've known that he can be a 3-level scorer, for a long time now, and he exhibited those qualities in the third quarter of this game, and that was a huge part of what the Wolves were able to do to kind of stem the tide. I mean, otherwise, third quarter defensively, transition defense was much better in this game for the Wolves, but in general, the defense still struggled at times. I think it was also partly the Spurs were just making tough shots.
Oh yeah, that Spurs team was impressive. Not just Monday night, but tonight too. That would have been pretty easy to kind of be deflated by an energized Wolves team, an energized Wolves crowd, and knowing you're not supposed to win that game and maybe not even supposed to be in that game. But the Wolves could not pull away decisively from that team at any point. That was a super impressive little rally that the Spurs just kind of kept giving over and over. Like they were not checking out at all.
Yeah, agreed. And the close to this game, yeah, I mean, it was the Wolves were able to kind of slam the door. A lot of that was Ant late. One of the things I'm going to break down a little bit more on the podcast was the rotation. We saw Naz Reid play essentially the Kyle Anderson minutes in the first half, end of the first quarter, play some 4, and then actually play a little bit of 5 with both Rudy and Cat off the floor. He didn't see any second half minutes. I thought that was interesting. Any other final takeaways on this one from you, Marnie?
I think just to reiterate that something Chris Finch said in his pregame press conference kind of stuck with me, where he did not sugarcoat the way the Wolves lost on Monday, and then tonight before the game he said something like, "We're not happy at all with the way Monday went, but we also fully believe that is not who we are." And you can say that all you want, and the Wolves can say everything they wanted in their postgame on Monday night about we're so much better than that. But until you actually play like it, there's no reason to believe you. And so I think tonight, playing like it, I get it wasn't a blowout win. We didn't beat the Spurs by 35, but the Wolves played a pretty good game. And they showed that they are and can be a pretty good team. And so even if this is just one step in that direction, I thought just playing that way and walking the walk instead of just talking the talk was pretty significant. And that's kind of the bottom line that I'm left with tonight.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just knowing that, like, hey, we can bounce back. We do have, and obviously you'd expect that in game 5 of the season. But to see that this team can do it and to give themselves that confidence here moving forward is huge. And now another winnable game on Friday against the Lakers, but the Wolves need to fall into the trap of not seeing all these games as super winnable, but just going out and playing like they did Wednesday, and they should be just fine. We'll of course be back on Friday night following that game for another live postcast. And then we'll have a full post-game podcast on the show here tomorrow, breaking down the game. Thanks once again for listening to Locked On Wolves. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Timberwolves, and also Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube where you're watching this. And we'll catch you next time.